What happens when a beloved comedy legend walks onto a daytime talk show expecting a pleasant chat about his career and instead gets ambushed by a host who decides to turn a simple interview into a personal attack? In just 47 seconds, one comment from Denise Welch would ignite a firestorm that turned a routine appearance into one of the most shocking moments in British television history. Eugene Levy, the man who brought us countless laughs through decades of film and television, found himself in a situation no guest should ever face. And what unfolded was a masterclass in grace under pressure, as one man stood his ground against a panel that seemed determined to make him uncomfortable. The morning started like any other taping of Loose Women. The studio audience filed in, excited to see Eugene Levy promoting his latest project. The panel sat ready at their usual table. Denise Welch in the center, flanked by Nadia Sawalha, Kay Adams, and Janet Street Porter. The energy in the room felt electric, but not in a good way. There was tension brewing before Eugene even walked out on stage. When Eugene entered, the audience erupted in applause. He smiled warmly, waving to the crowd with that signature humble charm that had made him a household name. He settled into the guest chair, adjusting his glasses, completely unaware of what was about to unfold. Denise started with what seemed like a standard opening. "Eugene, lovely to have you here. Now, we've been watching your work for years, and I have to say, you always play the same type of character, don't you? The awkward, bumbling dad type. Do you ever get tired of that?" Eugene chuckled, taking it in stride. "Well, I think there's depth in those characters. They're not just one note. They're fathers, husbands, people trying their best. I find a lot of heart in those roles." Nadia jumped in with a softer tone. "I think what Eugene does is beautiful. He brings such warmth to every character." But Denise wasn't done. She leaned forward, her expression sharp. "Yes, but let's be honest. You're not exactly stretching yourself as an actor, are you? I mean, how many times can you play the same nervous dad before it becomes, well, lazy?" The audience went quiet. Eugene's smile faltered for just a moment. "I wouldn't call it lazy. I think finding truth in a character, no matter how many times you visit similar territory, takes work. It takes care." Denise laughed, but it wasn't a kind laugh. "Oh, come on. You're telling me that showing up, doing your little eyebrow thing, and playing it safe is hard work? There are actors out there really pushing boundaries." Kay Adams shifted uncomfortably. "Denise, I think Eugene has had an incredible career. Not everyone needs to reinvent themselves constantly." "Thank you," Eugene said quietly, his voice still polite. "I've always tried to do work I'm proud of." Denise rolled her eyes. "Proud of? You mean profitable. Let's talk about the real reason you keep doing these films. It's easy money, isn't it? You've found a formula that works, and you're just milking it for all it's worth." Janet Street Porter chimed in, trying to redirect. "I think what's interesting is how Eugene has stayed relevant across generations. That's not easy to do." But Denise was on a roll. "Relevant? He's doing the same thing he did 20 years ago. That's not relevance. That's repetition. And quite frankly, I find it a bit insulting to audiences who want something more." Eugene took a breath. His tone remained measured, but there was an edge now. "I'm not sure why you're so intent on diminishing what I do. I came here to talk about my work, not to be told it's worthless." "I didn't say worthless," Denise shot back. "I said repetitive. There's a difference. Although, maybe they amount to the same thing in your case." The audience gasped. Nadia put her hand up. "Okay, Denise, that's a bit much." "Is it?" Denise challenged. "We're supposed to just sit here and fawn over every guest who walks through that door? I'm being honest. Someone needs to tell him that coasting on the same shtick for decades isn't impressive." Eugene's jaw tightened. "You know, I've been doing this for a long time. I've worked with incredible people, told stories that meant something to audiences around the world. If you think that's coasting, then I'm not sure what you consider real work. Denise leaned back, arms crossed. Real work is taking risks. Real work is challenging yourself. What you do is show up, collect a paycheck, and go home. It's comfortable. It's safe. And honestly, it's boring. Denise, please, Kay interjected again. This is supposed to be a friendly conversation. Why? Denise snapped, turning to Kay. Why do we have to pretend everything is wonderful all the time? I'm tired of it. We bring guests on, and we're expected to kiss their feet. Well, I'm not doing it anymore. Eugene stood up slightly in his chair, then sat back down. He looked directly at Denise. I don't need you to kiss my feet. I don't need you to like my work. But I do expect basic respect. You've spent the last few minutes attacking my career, my choices, my integrity. And for what? To prove you're edgy? To show you're not afraid to be confrontational? I'm being honest, Denise insisted. Maybe you're just not used to people being honest with you. Honest? Eugene repeated. You don't know me. You don't know the work that goes into what I do. You don't know the choices I've made or why I've made them. You're not being honest. You're being cruel. And there's a difference. The studio was silent except for a few scattered claps from the audience. Nadia reached over to touch Eugene's arm. Eugene, we're so glad you're here. Some of us really appreciate what you bring to the screen. But Denise wasn't finished. Oh, please, don't patronize him. He knows what he's doing. He's been playing the victim his whole career. The nice guy who everyone feels sorry for. It's part of the act. Eugene's face flushed. Part of the act? You think kindness is an act? You think being decent to people is a performance? When it serves you, yes, Denise said coldly, and it clearly serves you very well. Janet tried again. I think we should move on to another topic. Eugene, tell us about your new project. But Eugene was done. He removed his microphone, carefully placing it on the table. You know what? I don't think I will. I came here in good faith. I came here to have a conversation. Instead, I've been insulted, belittled, and accused of things that simply aren't true. I've been in this industry long enough to know when I'm not welcome somewhere. Kay looked panicked. Eugene, you don't have to leave. Denise is she's just being Denise. And that's supposed to make it okay? Eugene asked, standing now. That's supposed to excuse this behavior? I've sat through a lot of interviews in my life. I've answered tough questions. I've had critics question my work. But I've never been treated with such open contempt for absolutely no reason. Denise shrugged. If you can't handle a bit of honesty, maybe you shouldn't be doing press. Eugene stared at her for a long moment. Honesty. You keep using that word. But what you're doing isn't honesty. It's cruelty disguised as candor. And the fact that you don't see the difference is deeply troubling. Nadia stood up. Eugene, I'm so sorry. This isn't how this was supposed to go. I appreciate that, Eugene said, his voice softer now. But I can't stay here. I won't stay here and be treated like this. Denise laughed, actually laughed. Oh, here we go. The dramatic exit. Very Hollywood of you. There's nothing dramatic about having self-respect, Eugene replied. There's nothing Hollywood about refusing to be disrespected on national television. He turned to the audience. Thank you all for being here. I'm sorry you had to witness this. You deserve better. And quite frankly, so do I. The audience began to applaud, softly at first, then louder. It grew into a standing ovation. Eugene nodded, a small smile on his face, and began to walk off the set. Denise called after him. Running away won't change the truth about your career. Eugene stopped. He turned back, and for the first time, there was real anger in his voice. The truth is that I've spent my life trying to make people laugh, trying to bring some joy into the world, and you've spent the last 10 minutes trying to tear someone down for no reason other than your own ego. So you tell me, who's really failing here? The audience erupted. Kay put her head in her hands. Janet looked at Denise with an expression that clearly said, "What have you done?" Nadia stood frozen, unsure of what to do. Denise's face reddened. "How dare you come on this show and insult me like that?" "Insult you!" Eugene's voice rose. "Insult you? I've done nothing but defend myself against your attacks. You started this. You came after me the moment I sat down, and now you're angry because I finally pushed back?" "You're being oversensitive," Denise said, but her voice wavered. "No," Eugene said firmly. "I'm being human. I'm reacting like any person would when they're being bullied. Because that's what this is. This is bullying, plain and simple. And I'm not going to stand here and take it." A producer appeared from off stage, clearly trying to de-escalate, but Eugene held up his hand. "I'm leaving. There's nothing more to say." Kay stood up. "Eugene, please, we can sort this out." "Sort what out?" Eugene asked. "She's made it very clear how she feels, and I've made it very clear that I won't tolerate being spoken to that way. There's nothing to sort out." Denise finally seemed to realize the gravity of the situation. "Look, maybe I came on a bit strong." "A bit strong?" Eugene's eyebrows shot up. "You called my career boring, lazy, and repetitive. You accused me of being fake. You mocked everything I've worked for. That's not coming on a bit strong. That's being deliberately hurtful." "I was just trying to have a real conversation," Denise said, but she sounded less certain now. "A real conversation involves two people talking with mutual respect," Eugene said. "What you were doing was trying to provoke me for entertainment. Well, congratulations. You succeeded, but not in the way you wanted." He turned to leave again, and this time he didn't stop. The audience continued to applaud, many of them standing. Nadia had tears in her eyes. Janet shook her head slowly. Kay looked at Denise with disappointment written all over her face. As Eugene disappeared backstage, Denise tried to regain control. "Well, that was unexpected." "Was it?" Janet said sharply. "Was it really unexpected, Denise? You went after him from the start." "I was asking legitimate questions," Denise defended. "You were being nasty," Kay said bluntly. "There's no other word for it. You were nasty to a lovely man who came here to talk about his work." Nadia wiped her eyes. "I can't believe that just happened. He didn't deserve any of that." Denise looked around the table, finally seeming to understand that she'd gone too far. I was just trying to make good television." "Good television?" Janet scoffed. "You just drove off one of the most respected actors in the business. You humiliated him on live television. How is that good television?" The audience murmured in agreement. Someone shouted, "You should apologize." Denise looked at the cameras, then at her fellow panelists. "I think we should take a break." "I think you should take a break," Kay said coldly. "A long one." The show cut to commercial, but the damage was done. Eugene Levy, a man who had spent decades making people smile, had been pushed to his breaking point by a host who seemed more interested in controversy than conversation. Backstage, Eugene was removing his guest badge when several crew members approached him. "Mr. Levy, we're so sorry. That should never have happened." Eugene smiled, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "It's not your fault. You were all very kind." "She had no right to speak to you that way," another crew member said. "No, she didn't," Eugene agreed. "But I'm glad I didn't just sit there and take it. I'm glad I stood up for myself." One of the producers rushed over. "Eugene, please, is there anything we can do? We want to make this right." Eugene shook his head. "I appreciate that, but I think the best thing I can do is leave. This isn't an environment I want to be in." "We understand," the producer said quietly, "and for what it's worth, most of us are horrified by what just happened." "I believe you," Eugene said, but it doesn't change what happened. It doesn't erase those words. He gathered his things and headed for the exit. As he walked through the backstage area, more people stopped to express their support. Assistants, cameramen, makeup artists. They all knew he'd been wronged. They all knew Denise had crossed a line. When Eugene finally made it outside, he took a deep breath of fresh air. The whole ordeal had lasted less than 20 minutes, but it felt like hours. He thought about all the interviews he'd done over the years, all the press tours, all the talk shows. He'd never experienced anything quite like this. Back in the studio, the show returned from commercial. Denise was noticeably subdued. Kay took the lead. We want to address what just happened. Our guest, Eugene Levy, felt uncomfortable and chose to leave. We respect his decision. Denise added, I may have pushed too hard with my questions. You think? Janet muttered, loud enough for the microphones to pick up. Nadia looked at the camera. Eugene, if you're watching, we're truly sorry. You're a wonderful actor and an even better person. You didn't deserve that treatment. The rest of the show limped along, but the energy was completely different. The panelists barely spoke to each other. The audience was restless. Everyone knew they'd just witnessed something significant. In the following segment, they tried to move on to other topics, but it felt hollow. How could they just continue as if nothing had happened? How could they pretend that one of their hosts hadn't just driven away a beloved guest? Kay addressed the elephant in the room during the next break. I think we need to talk about this properly. What's there to talk about? Denise said defensively. He overreacted. He overreacted? Nadia's voice was sharp. Denise, you insulted him repeatedly. You questioned his integrity. You mocked his career. How did you expect him to react? I expected him to have a backbone, Denise said. I expected him to defend his work without getting emotional. He did defend his work, Janet pointed out, with eloquence and grace. More grace than you showed him, certainly. Oh, so now you're all ganging up on me? Denise looked around the table. I'm the bad guy? You made yourself the bad guy, Kay said simply. This wasn't about having tough conversations or being honest. This was about you being unnecessarily cruel to someone who's never done anything to you. Denise went quiet. For the first time, she seemed to genuinely reflect on her behavior. But it was too late. The interview was over. Eugene was gone, and nothing could undo what had been said. The show wrapped up awkwardly. The panelists said their goodbyes to the audience without their usual warmth. As soon as the cameras stopped rolling, Denise stood up and walked off set without a word to anyone. Nadia turned to Kay. I've never seen anything like that in all my years on this show. Neither have I, Kay agreed, and I hope I never see it again. Janet packed up her notes. He handled it better than she did. That's what people are going to remember. Not her attacks, but his dignity in the face of them. He's a class act, Nadia said. Always has been. Today just proved it even more. The three women left the set together, leaving behind an empty studio and the lingering tension of what had just transpired. The crew began breaking down the equipment, many of them still talking about the incident. Did you see his face when she called his work boring? One camera operator said. I felt so bad for him, a makeup artist replied. He's always so nice when he comes to the chair. Always says thank you, asks how your day is going. He didn't deserve that. None of our guests deserve that, the floor manager added. I don't care who they are or what Denise thinks of them. There's a way to conduct an interview, and that wasn't it. Meanwhile, Eugene had made it to his car. His publicist was on the phone, already fielding calls about what had happened. Eugene, are you okay? Do you want to make a statement? No statement, Eugene said. What happened speaks for itself. I don't need to add anything to it. The network is calling. They want to know if you'll come back to finish the interview. Eugene laughed, but there was no humor in it. Absolutely not. I'm not setting foot in that studio again. I'm not giving them a chance to try to spin this into something it wasn't. Understood, his publicist said. I'll let them know. Eugene drove away from the studio, his mind replaying the confrontation. He'd been in uncomfortable interviews before. He'd fielded weird questions, dealt with interviewers who didn't do their research, sat through boring conversations. But this was different. This was personal. This was someone actively trying to make him feel small, and he'd refused to shrink. That was the part he was proud of. He could have smiled through it. He could have laughed it off. He could have played the good sport and pretended everything was fine. But he didn't. He stood up for himself. He drew a line and said, "No more." There was power in that. There was strength in recognizing your own worth and refusing to let someone diminish it. Eugene had learned that lesson long ago, but today had been a reminder, a stark, uncomfortable reminder that not everyone would treat him with kindness. And that was okay, because he didn't need everyone to like him. He just needed to like himself. As he drove through the streets, his phone buzzed with messages, fellow actors reaching out, friends checking in, people who had seen what happened and wanted to offer support. He'd read them later. Right now, he just wanted to breathe. Back at the Loose Women studio, the producers were in an emergency meeting. The phones hadn't stopped ringing. Viewers calling in. Social media exploding. Everyone had an opinion on what had just happened, and most of those opinions were not favorable to Denise. "This is a disaster," one producer said. "We've never had a guest walk off before. Never." "Maybe that should tell us something," another replied. "Maybe we need to rethink how we conduct these interviews." "Or maybe we need to rethink who's conducting them," someone added pointedly. The meeting went on for hours. Discussions about damage control, about how to address the situation publicly, about whether disciplinary action was needed. It was a mess, a completely avoidable mess. Eugene's exit hadn't just been dramatic. It had been justified, and that was what made it so powerful. He hadn't stormed off in a fit of ego. He hadn't left because someone asked a tough question. He'd left because he was being mistreated, and he had the self-respect to say enough. That evening, clips of the interview circulated online. But it wasn't Denise's attacks that went viral. It was Eugene's responses. His calm, measured words. His refusal to be diminished. His final statement about bringing joy versus tearing people down. Those were the moments people shared. Those were the words people quoted. The truth is that I've spent my life trying to make people laugh, trying to bring some joy into the world. And you've spent the last 10 minutes trying to tear someone down for no reason other than your own ego. So you tell me, who's really failing here? That line resonated. It cut through all the noise and got to the heart of what had happened. One person trying to create, another trying to destroy. And in the end, it was clear who had won. Eugene Levy didn't need to issue a statement. He didn't need to defend himself further. His actions had done all the talking necessary. He'd walked into that studio as a respected actor. He'd walked out as something more, a man who knew his worth, a man who wouldn't compromise his dignity for anyone. And Denise Welch? She'd walked into that interview as a controversial host known for her outspoken nature. She'd emerged as something else entirely. Someone who had crossed a line. Someone who had forgotten that being honest doesn't mean being cruel. The incident became a teaching moment about how to treat guests, about the difference between tough questions and personal attacks, about the importance of respect in any conversation. It wasn't the kind of moment anyone wanted to be part of, but it was the kind of moment that changes things. Eugene's career didn't suffer. If anything, it was enhanced. People saw him in a new light, not just as the funny dad from the movies, but as a man of principle. Someone who would stand up for himself when necessary. Someone who understood that kindness wasn't weakness and that drawing boundaries was healthy. The interview, or what there was of it, would be remembered for years. Not as a successful confrontation or compelling television, but as a cautionary tale about what happens when a host forgets their role, about what happens when provocation replaces conversation, about what happens when someone pushes too far and pays the price. Eugene Levy had come to Loose Women to talk about his work. Instead, he'd given a masterclass in dignity, self-respect, and knowing when to walk away. It wasn't the interview anyone had planned, but it was the interview everyone needed to see. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to participate in your own diminishment. Sometimes the strongest move is simply to say, "No, I deserve better than this," and then follow through. That's exactly what Eugene did. And in doing so, he reminded everyone watching that respect isn't optional. It's fundamental. And when it's absent, the only reasonable response is to remove yourself from the situation. No apologies, no second guessing, just a clear, firm boundary and the courage to enforce it. The walking away wasn't defeat.